Hey friends, my name is Beck and thank you so much for clicking on today's video. I'm sharing with you my birth story. So if you haven't seen my birth vlog, you can click up here or in the description box below. But today I am sharing the details that I didn't pick the camera up for. So if you like the sound of this video, please give it a big thumbs up. It really does support my channel. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell to get notified. Let's get into it. If you've been following our channel for a little bit, you would know that I documented the entire pregnancy here on my channel, and there is a playlist if you want to go back and watch my weekly bump dates. Finneas was measuring in the 90th percentile, so he was projected to be quite a large baby, and to prevent him getting stuck and having complications during labor, my obstetrician and I decided the best course of action would be to get induced. So we got induced at 38 weeks and 3 days, and that ended up being the 16th of September 2020. The night before, we packed our hospital bags, I baked a batch of lactation cookies, we kissed the girls goodnight for the final time, and then in the morning we had a really early start. We had to be at the hospital at 6:30. We went up and my obstetrician came in soon after, actually probably like 6:45, and she did a final checkup, and I was 3 to 4 centimeters dilated, which was really good because the week leading up especially, I felt a lot of Braxton Hicks contractions and feeling like my body was gearing up for labor. So it was good to hear that my body had been doing some preparation work. My obstetrician and I went with plan A, which was to get my waters popped. It was a difficult process this time around. So I've had my waters popped for all 3 labors to get it going, and popping Finneas's water was the hardest, and it was quite interesting because it took a couple of times. The same sound and feeling that I was having when my doctor was popping my waters were the same sounds and feelings that I had on the inside with Finn, but I don't think he was able to actually pop them. I feel like if he could have, he probably would have before my inducement date. Once my waters were popped, my obstetrician said, "See you soon," and we decided to go for a long walk because this is what really established my labor with Zoe, who's my second born. So we walked around the hospital campus, we went up and down hills, up and down stairs. We were enjoying the sun because it was the change of season from winter to spring. And we were just having some quality time, the two of us, before we brought little Bubby into the world. When we came back to the hospital, because we had to come back every hour for a checkup, my contractions were really irregular and my midwife had actually gone off on her tea break. So we had a different midwife come in and she said to me that it was time to get my cannula put in, which I had no problems with. I gave it a go, and she was a very interesting personality. So it hurt a lot and she wasn't even able to get it in. And you know when someone's sticking a needle in you and like kind of jabbing around to try and get it in, she was doing that, and that really made me get triggered sensorily wise, which caused me to have a bit of a meltdown. Because she was unable to do it, she said that she was going to get a doctor to do it. And then when the anaesthetist came in, I was so high functioning and on the break of having a big meltdown that I asked the doctor if he could come back at a later time because I really needed to regroup because it was just a really unpleasant feeling. And I know that sounds so stupid because I was in labor and I was about to give birth to a child. It just really made me lose my kind of peace and zen in order to get into a good headspace for the pain of labor. The midwife that was dealing with me was really rude, and she told me that if I didn't get my cannula in, that the anaesthetist would probably be busy by the time I would want it, and so I wouldn't be able to get my epidural, and I just couldn't deal with the situation at all. And I said that was fine, even though deep down I was really panicking because an epidural was part of my birth plan and I didn't want it to be off the table. And she was just really short with me and very abrupt, and then she just left the room and I just cried. I was starting to hyperventilate. I couldn't deal with the situation. I felt like my birth plan was going out the window. So after a while, Michael buzzed for a midwife to come back, And my midwife was still on her tea breaks, but we had a different midwife, and we explained the situation and how it was really starting to get to me and make me quite upset. The second midwife said that not getting a cannula wasn't going to rule out an epidural for me at all, and she said that we could do whatever I needed to do to find my peace and to feel grounded again. So we asked if I could go for one more walk. She said absolutely, and that I just needed to come back in that hour time frame for my next checkup. Going for a walk was what I absolutely needed to prepare myself for labor, because the event of the nurse trying to put the cannula in and it not working and telling me that I needed to get Pitocin because I needed to kickstart my labor really made me feel like my labor was like a runaway train, and it was just making me feel like I had absolutely no control at all of the situation. It was snowballing into something that I couldn't control, and I was getting really fearful and stressed and just, yeah, I couldn't deal with it at all. So going for a walk, being in the fresh air, having my mask off was also really good, because when I was laboring in hospital, I needed to wear a mask, which is really difficult to do. And so being out in the sunshine, having my mask off, having the cold, crisp air on my skin, and just being in nature was exactly what I needed to get grounded, and therefore I started active labor. So I was getting contractions every 5 minutes on that walk, and by the time we came back, it was established, and they were every 5 minutes lasting between 10 to 30 seconds. Once we got back into the maternity ward, my midwife had come off her morning tea break, and it was such a relief to see her friendly face again. She was really encouraging and supportive of my labor. She was excited that it was in active labor, that my contractions were really regular. She was checking bub all the time, making sure I was okay, and she said that because it was my third labor, she was going to go and get the birthing suite ready, because it wouldn't be too long until I would need to get there in order to have happy gas and my epidural, etc, etc. So during that time frame, I went and had a shower and did some laboring in the shower. I feel like that really does help. It was at this stage when my contractions were starting to get really painful that I said to Michael I was more than happy to try again for my cannula. It wasn't the fact that I didn't want to have it, I just needed to be in the right headspace for it, because the pain that the first midwife gave me in trying to find it and being unsuccessful really was a roadblock for me. The anaesthetist came in, and he was so sweet and so kind, and he even timed putting the cannula in during one of my contractions, which I know seems really bad, but it gave me a distraction, because when I have a contraction, I breathe in and out and I count so that it regulates my breathing. So I think I breathed in on even numbers and out on odd numbers, and that way I felt like I had a bit of control with the peak and the trough of the contraction. And he was so efficient, so quick, I didn't even really notice that it had gone in, and it was an absolute blessing that this anaesthetist could give me an experience that I felt like I could get on top and in control of my labor again. And this was the start of things progressing quite fast. Once my cannula was in, this is where labor really started to ramp up. I wasn't on anything, it was just because it was my third baby and things were going to progress quite fast. Once the anaesthetist left the room, I labored on the gym ball. It was really difficult to do it with a mask on, because trying to breathe through the contractions with a barrier, not fun at all. Soon after, my midwife came back in after getting the birthing suite ready and said that I was good to go, and we gathered up everything that I needed and we headed to the birth suite. Things that we took to the birth suite were my essential oils. We took mix phone so that we could play music through the sound system that was in the room. We took a camera, we took my pillow, and we took my water bottle. Heading over to the birth suite, I did have a couple of contractions, which were quite painful because I don't like contracting while standing up. I really like to be grounded and to be sitting on a gym ball. Once we got to the birth suite, things started to ramp up, obviously, because my labor was progressing, and I didn't waste my time in asking for happy gas. I know with Amira's labor, because I was a first-time mom, I didn't realize that you had to ask for pain relief. I kind of just assumed they would give you pain relief if like they offered it at a certain time. So I asked for the happy gas, and that got all organized, and they called for the anaesthetist to come. So he probably took about an hour to get to the room, which was fine. In that time frame, I was using the happy gas obviously as pain relief, but also as a way to regulate my breathing, making sure that I was breathing in and out, long, slow, deep breaths. And I really found having the gas helped me to breathe through the contractions. So my epidural story this time round wasn't the best case scenario, and I believe it's related to my miscarriage though, because the week before I lost Alex, I woke up with wry neck, and I ended up going to hospital because the pain and the spasms was that bad and uncontrollable. And when I arrived in the emergency room, the pain relief that the doctor gave me was a local right into my neck, and it was so bad that I was screaming out in pain that a nurse came in and said, "Is everything okay?" And the doctor was like, yeah, it's fine. And just, he didn't care for the fact that he was causing me so much pain. And already my senses were heightened from obviously being in labor and having a needle that was unsuccessful with my cannula, that when the anaesthetist started to probe and poke around really rough, it triggered all of these emotions in me, and I just didn't really feel ready for it. And at the same time, the happy gas really took over, so I started to become really lightheaded. And even though I was having contractions, he didn't stop for me to suck the gas, and it just was an experience that wasn't enjoyable. And I know that sounds so silly because you're in labor and you're having the most intense pain of your life, but there were things that were happening in my epidural that were super sensory for me, and it just wasn't enjoyable at all. And when he put my epidural in, he nicked a surface vein, and I ended up with a really big bruise. So I started to bleed quite a bit, and they ended up just saying that because I would be lying on my back, that pressure would stop it from bleeding. The epidural happened, and he said to give it about half an hour. And I obviously wasn't clock watching because I was still having contractions, and I just figured the moment that the contraction pain started to ease would be roughly half an hour. It was at this moment that my midwives actually swapped, because I had the start of the next shift, the evening shift, and that midwife was looking at how my body was reacting and the contractions and everything, and she had a feeling that I was ready to go. So the epidural was about 2 o'clock that I got it in, and it was getting close to 3 when she said that she wanted to just have a look and see how things were going. So she checked, and I was fully effaced, fully dilated, and that I was ready to push Bub out. And this is where I started to panic just a little bit, because I was still using the happy gas to take the edge off the pain of my contractions, because the epidural hadn't fully kicked in yet, and that freaked me out. So I asked my midwife if she could up the dose of my epidural, just because I was really concerned that I was going to feel way more than I had bargained for, especially after the epidural experience not being so good. I really just wanted to feel pressure and not pain, and that's how my epidural worked for both Amira and Zoe. I just felt pressure, but no pain associated with it. This time, however, I was only numb on one side, so we upped the dose of the epidural, and we tried to wash it over onto my right side. However, Finneas was ready to come out, and I didn't get the time for the epidural to wash over both sides and for the pain to decrease. And I think that I fought my body in giving birth because I didn't want it to give birth, even though I did. It was a weird mixture of feelings. So at 4 o'clock I was ready to go, and my obstetrician was called. She came down, and my contractions stopped. Absolutely stopped. And it could have been the adrenaline, could be anything really. So because I already had my cannula in, they put in a round of Pitocin, with the goal of it kick-starting my contractions again so that I could work with my contractions to get Bobby out. We had to try a couple of positions in order to get Finneas's head to crown because he was getting stuck on my coccyx. The crowning of Finn's head and his shoulders was definitely an experience that I hadn't planned on experiencing. It really did hurt, but in saying that, it happens so fast that you forget the pain, you forget everything, because when Bub comes out, all is absolutely right with the world. So when they put Finneas on me, it was at 4:43. He was a very sleepy baby because when he had crowned, his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck a little bit. Not something to be alarmed about, and my obstetrician just unhooked it and then he came out, but she said he was a very sleepy baby, which you can see in the birth vlog. It then took another 2 minutes for Finn to wake up and actually give his first cry, which was at 4:45. And this was the biggest relief because having a miscarriage, I never want to have a sleeping baby. Sleeping babies freak me out and I never want to lose another child again. So those 2 minutes were the longest 2 minutes ever. After Finn was delivered, things went really smooth. I had my shot in my leg, my placenta was delivered, there was no complications. I didn't tear, I didn't need stitches. My obstetrician said that it was pretty much a graze, which is really good because in postpartum recovery, I feel like it has been my easiest one to recover from because I didn't have any stitches. It was absolutely an experience, and every labor is so completely different, and that's one thing that I struggle with because I like to have predictable sequences. Amira's labor being my first was a really big unknown, and it was quite long, quite intense with complications. Zoe's, on the other hand, because I had experienced Amira's labor, was more predictable and had a better sequence, and because it was such a good experience for me, that's how I thought Finneas's labor was going to go. But Finn's labor was different again, and I'm sure number 4 will be as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions about this labor or my other 2 and I haven't addressed it in this video, please feel free to ask me in the comment section below and I will get back to you. This is just my experience, and it was a challenging experience, and I'm sure that this could absolutely stop us from having kids. However, this is just one day that I had to go through, and having Finn in our family is absolutely worth everything that happened. And even though I can recount the events that happened, I cannot describe in detail any of the pain or irritation or any negative emotion attached to labor. I just know that it happened, but I don't have that muscle memory of like describing exactly what it felt like. And that's the blessing, is once you have that bub in your arms and you have all those beautiful hormones rushing through you, something as hard and traumatic as giving birth can just become a distant, faded memory. But thank you so much if you've gotten to this stage of the video. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. It really does support my channel. Don't forget to hit subscribe and tap the bell to get notified, because this parenting gig doesn't come in the rule book. We only have each other. And I'll see you in my next upload.